Good evening. Welcome to this recording, what substitutes as a webinar. I want to discuss assignment number 2, developing a project plan. We're going to talk about the project plan, the presentation, the time, the format, the academic standard that you have to achieve, how it's connected to your first assignment. We'll cover the rubric that's established for marking, and we'll cover what has been presented in the course content relevant to assignment 2. So you should be nearing the end of your content now, covering chapters 7, 8, 9 and 10, which are requirements for the assignment. The next few chapters that you will deal with will draw together all the content and prepare you for the final assignment. Okay, so here's some key dates for you. By the 24th of June, all your quizzes need to be complete. By the 29th of June, your second assignment should be submitted. In this assignment, the task requires you to build on from what you have done in assignment 1. You are required to develop a complete project plan relevant to your chosen project. If you want to do something new, if you feel that your original assignment in the first, your project, the first assignment was not up to standard, you can start on something new if you want to. The lesson, however, is that you should be building on that. You're required to consider, name and account for a major project setback that will occur during the project life cycle. The case study needs to be structured, systematic, and must use theories, models, and concepts you've learned in this subject. In other words, it has to meet academic standards. You should also utilize a demonstrated working example of project management software or digital tools that you have selected to help you manage the project through to completion. What we need to see is a clear work breakdown structure that is unified through the project integration management framework, a demonstrated understanding of schedule, cost and quality, identification of key project roles, and by roles it's quite clear that what we mean is the function to be performed. You'll say, I need an engineer, I need a project manager, I need someone doing security or resourcing, supply chain. I don't want to see Mary will do this, Henry will do that. That's not what we're asking you to do. Look at the roles. You need to cover risk and how you're going to manage risk. And there needs to be a concise conclusion that persuasively justifies why project management is essential and is important for business activity, risk and strategy. Okay, let's get on with the content. It's due on the 29th of June. It's 45% of your marks. If you don't get a good mark on this, you're going to have trouble with a good grade at the end of the semester. It covers the entire program of work from chapters 1 through 10. I'm going to go through that. You should submit it in Microsoft Word .doc for Windows or .docx if you've got Apple. The length is 2,500 words, plus or minus 10%. I will stop reading at 2,750 words. If you put 4,000 words in, I'm not going to read all the rest of it. So that will mean that from my point of view, you haven't finished the assignment if you run over. I will stop reading at the required length. And you have to reference properly according to academic standards. I'll cover a bit more of this later. I'm going to cover it now. Wikipedia, Google, newspapers, trade mags, and social media are not academic references. Facebook is not an academic reference. Instagram is not an academic reference. What we're looking for is peer-reviewed academic papers. Search using the library or scholar.google.com. You're familiar with the rubric. It's been posted up on canvas since you started. So 10% of the mark on the bottom, you can see there 10% is if you have done proper referencing. So you're going to use 10% straight off the top if you don't reference properly using Harvard standards. And this is the university standards, pretty straightforward. The formatting, the structure, the language, a further 10%. You need to demonstrate that you've put effort in to researching and understanding the adequate use of project management tools. You need to identify major risks. That's a key area. 20% on risk management. 30% of demonstrating and grasp of concepts and frameworks of schedule, cost and quality across the project plan. And 15% for work breakdown structure and project integration methodology. Assignment 2 requires you to build on from what you have done in Assignment 1. You're required to develop a complete project plan relevant to your chosen project from that assignment. As I said, you can choose something different if you want, but I wouldn't. For Assignment 2, you are required to consider, name and account for a major setback. This is a suggestion of what could be in your assignment. So you could follow this if you want to. It'll be easier for you if you do. I'm going to cover these contents. Okay, these are the basics: title, contents, and executive summary. The executive summary is written last. It's the summary of what is covered in the rest of the paper. It should be punchy. Many executives will only ever read the summary and never the detail. The main content: the introduction to the project plan, which will cover business activity, work breakdown structure, and project integration management. Project roles, schedule, cost, quality, risk, and then show us how you've used the software. Okay. The business activity. So this comes from chapter 2.1, which you can go back and have a look at your notes. Organizational context. The strategic importance of the project, the capacity of the stakeholders to exert influence, the degree of project management maturity, what systems are in place, the organizational structure, how you're going to communicate. Describe the purpose of the project, the scope, and the problem being solved. Take that from Assignment 1. That's why it's easier to follow on. Project integration management is the coordination of all elements of a project. This includes coordinating tasks, resources, stakeholders, and any other elements in the project, in addition to managing conflicts between different aspects of a project and making the necessary trade-offs that will happen on a daily basis. One example would be if a project is not on track, you may need to decide between going over budget or finishing the project late in order to complete it. Sometimes you will not have a choice. You will not be able to go over budget. You will not be able to finish late. And so you'll have to decide what you're going to cut in order to deliver on time. In software, we might refer to this as the minimum viable product. What can we get out the door that works, is embarrassing, and needs to be built on. But you want to ship early and ship often. Project integration management is one of the 10 key knowledge areas in the PMBOK. It's considered a critical success factor for project managers. Work breakdown structure, it's just like an org chart. A hierarchical and graphical representation of all the work that needs to be completed over the entire life cycle of the project. Now, depending upon what project management methodology you're following, this will be done to a greater or lesser degree at the beginning of the project. If it's agile, it's done at a high level. It's still done, but a lot of the detail will be captured later in an agile project. In a waterfall project or a plan-based project, you'll put a lot more effort in up front. Project roles comes from Chapter 9. The main focus in human resources management is people skills, Essential ingredient to project management, you're always managing people. Acquiring and assigning responsibilities may be organised by the organisation or through the PMO, based on the skills resources available. The most challenging part for the project manager is about developing and managing the team and providing sufficient motivation and support. Chapter 9 covers a lot of the techniques and a lot of the theory around how you manage people. Here's what you might consider in your assignment. Who is on your team? Roles, not names. What skills are needed? How will you measure success? When will they be needed? These are just some of the basic questions to be answered in this section. Schedule comes from Chapter 6, Cost Chapter 7, Quality Chapter 8. Each of these sections has a subsection on management and controls. Schedule. You've heard of the iron triangle: time, cost, quality. There are 6 things which define schedule. You define all of the tasks and activities. You create a logical order for completing those tasks. You identify the resources required for each of those tasks, how long each will take. You develop a project schedule, and then you manage that schedule. So how do you develop those tasks? Are they planned versus agile? Will resource availability affect those? Yeah, it does. If you're running a movie, you will shoot your scenes out of order because they'll be shot around the resources available. So you might have set up a particular set, and you've got shots at that set at both the beginning and the end of the movie. So you will shoot the beginning and shoot the end at the same time because you're shooting it around a built set, a resource that is required. So you have to look at the schedule in relation to when the tasks need to be done. Are they dependent on other things? Who needs them to do them? When are people available? Etc. All right, plan versus agile. We have discussed this before. Waterfall projects are called plan-based. The reason for this is because the underlying principle of waterfall projects is that every problem can be solved by planning and preparing. This has been a fundamentally flawed assumption in information systems since they became common in the 1960s. From a legal perspective, the contracts that governed this flawed process were trying to implement certainty over a process that cannot be effectively managed. The contracts for waterfall endeavour to assign measures and accountability where none can be assigned. Disputes end in finger-pointing and recrimination. Agile is the software development process intended to redress the problem of not being able to fully plan a project from inception to completion. The concept of Agile is that a full set of requirements will evolve as the solution is developed. According to Agile is focusing on identifying the outcomes rather than the process. Contracts for Agile need to be constructed with a focus on outcomes. You need to determine the project objectives, collect the project requirements, define the scope, identify dependencies between activities, estimate the work effort, prepare the schedule and project budget, get approval, baseline the plan, and have a formal change management process. The difference between waterfall and agile, or an iterative approach, is explained here. The agile approach has sprints or different implementations, which may occur every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. Whereas in a waterfall approach, you will be recovering the entire requirements component up front, then the design, then the code, unit test and debug, subsystem testing and release, and you see everything at the end. The Agile fundamentals are it's an iterative development with a small product release, it's test-driven, you have self-organizing teams, and you start by building a backlog, a set of requirements, and you manage that backlog through the process. Which one is your project? Well, consider the size, duration, complexity, organizational factors, clients or stakeholders, Are you building, is it a physical construction? So are you throwing up a building, a bridge, a road, or IT? Waterfall projects are good where you're working with other organisations or remote workers. If you have a fixed scope, time and budget. On smaller, well-defined and simpler projects, projects with an absent or limited availability to the client. Agile projects are better where your own organisation is responsible for the whole process. There's scope for changing requirements or you're learning as you go. Larger, undefined and complex activities. Projects with an involved client where there is a cultural fit. And where you can pay for what's delivered as it's delivered. Okay, cost. Chapter 7. Cost flows from schedule. So once you've done that work breakdown structure, you've identified the resources, you've created the dependencies. That's the foundation for building your project plan. Now we can move to cost because we understand the work that has to be done. Each of these methods for cost development has been discussed in Chapter 7.2. Which is best? Research suggests that analogous has the highest degree of effective outcomes, but it requires input from practiced professionals that can call upon their previous experience to say, last time at X company, a similar problem took Y amount of time. In Agile, they have estimate bingo, where each member of the team throws in a card, literally a playing card, with a time scale on it. And then they sort out how a commonly agreed estimate from that. So you have to have talent in order to do analogous estimation, but it is the best. Quality is covered in Chapter 8. Quality should always be decided by the end user rather than those doing the actual work. For example, a computer system used by customer service staff must be able to deal with peak loads. In this case, a quality standard could specify that when 100 staff are inputting data at the same time, the system response time still should be the same as when 2 staff are using it and you get less than 2 seconds. And then you would scale your servers and equipment purchases to compensate for that. So there are various quality techniques discussed in Chapter 8.2, fishbone diagrams, check sheets, Pareto diagrams. Which one are you going to use? How will you use those techniques? Please describe those. Risk and control is covered in Chapter 10. A risk is a future event that may or may not happen, but if it does, it will have an impact on project scope, schedule, budget, and or quality. It may have one or more causes, and if it occurs, it may have one or more impacts. All project activities carry some element of risk. They're uncertainties, and you need to understand what those are. It is important to understand the difference between business risk and project risk. What a project manager needs to know is what is the likelihood a risk will occur, and if it does, what will it impact, and how does that affect the project plan. Make sure you have a risk register. At minimum, that must cover risk likelihood, risk impact, risk cost, and risk mitigation. That's the minimum. Under the heading of software demonstration, in this section, what we're looking for is a screenshot of your project documents that have been captured in the project planning tool that you have adopted for this assignment. I've got one here of an actual project, and this is taken from the product Asana. And it'll give you an idea of how to do things. Okay, folks, that's it. Good luck with your assignment. I hope it all goes very well for you.